we learned that the Metropolitan Police were notified by the FBI that they are to question or try and question this novelist who was a ghostwriter for an autobiography that I believe Assange later disowned, wanted nothing to do with, was not happy with how it was done, but that's not really important to what we're talking about here. The FBI contacted Andrew O'Hagan at his home in London about his time working in 2011 with Assange. Now, supporters had believed that they were making some headway when it came to lobbying the Australian government and getting meetings with US officials. Joe Biden was supposed to come to Australia, but the debt ceiling debacle meant that he didn't come to Australia. And everyone was working towards this possibility that there could be a breakthrough that could free Julian Assange. Maybe some kind of a deal could be inked. You may not remember, but David Hicks was an Australian who was detained at Guantanamo Bay. It's been cited frequently as an example. The Bush administration bargained with the Australian government. Eventually, Australia was able to secure the release of David Hicks. Now, Julian Assange is not somebody who was arrested for terrorism, but he gets treated like a terrorist, and he's in a prison in London right now with other terrorists. It's a high security prison, and he shouldn't be treated like that. And there's a similar effort underway to get Assange and have him returned to Australia. But the government now must contend with this development, which sees that apparently the Metropolitan Police. This is a notification, and that the Counterterrorism Command, they notify O'Hagan that they attended his home, so they came there. And we have been contacted recently by officers of the Federal Bureau of Investigations in D.C. who would like to speak to you. The FBI would like to discuss your experience with Assange and WikiLeaks as referenced in the unauthorized autobiography of Julian Assange. So this is the letter, a copy of it. And then O'Hagan has stood up to this. And I would not give a witness statement against a fellow journalist being pursued for telling the truth. I would happily go to jail before agreeing in any way to support the American security establishment in this cynical effort. O'Hagan said he is surprised the FBI investigation was still ongoing, and he believes the attempt to interview him shows some desperation on their part. They are using the Espionage Act to victimize an organization that sought to hold governments to account. I might have differences with Julian, but I utterly oppose all efforts to silence him. A Metropolitan spokesperson was asked to comment, but, of course, they do not talk about these kinds of things. So what is this? What's this about? Why is this happening? Ryan Grimm over at The Intercept also pointed out that this comes at the same time that we have this news that the U.S. warned like a couple years ago that it was going to have to suspend ties with Australian special forces over war crime allegations, or that it might have to, or would have to rethink it way it worked with some of the people in the Australian special forces. That's pretty funny because the U.S. hasn't held anyone, for the most part, accountable for U.S. war crimes. And the idea that they can't collaborate with people who are accused of war crimes, who are actually confirmed to have committed war crimes in the Australian forces, it's farcical that we as a country have a government that won't partner with military forces that commit crimes. But if the United States is responsible, or if it partners with certain forces, as was exposed by WikiLeaks, that are engaged in torture or other war crimes, And then if those need to be covered up in order to achieve military objectives, so that's going to be perfectly okay for the United States military. And if the U.S. military is accused of killing an aid worker instead of a terrorist who should not have been attacked, and if that's exposed as a war crime, and there's an investigation that should be done, and there's people inside the Air Force or other parts of the military who say, as whistleblowers, that that was wrong, well, then they'll do their own investigation. They'll investigate themselves. The Pentagon investigates their own war crimes, and then they'll determine that nothing really happened that was of consequence, and nobody will get in trouble, and nobody will be reassigned usually. And it'll be as if, at most you might get an apology from the Pentagon chief will come out and say that should not have happened. And then it's as if everything is okay. And so this idea that there would be some kind of snarl in the relationship between Australia and the United States over war crimes committed by Australian special forces, that is fairly hilarious. So the US government, the US Justice Department, the FBI, what are they hoping to achieve here? Why are they questioning these witnesses? Is it in preparation for a trial with Assange? I mean, that, as far as process goes, they don't have to be ready for that for another probably 2 years. We are still waiting for some kind of notification from the High Court of Justice in the UK as to whether Julian Assange will get to have a hearing and appeal the extradition decision. So while he languishes and his condition deteriorates in a jail cell, in detention, they're just taking their time, these justices. I thought that possibly I took a trip to London in early April. I thought possibly we would get the news then. It's been almost 2 months. It's been almost 2 months since, and still, we're coming up on a year since Assange submitted this appeal. You can't even say that the gears of justice grind slowly. It's as if they're not even grinding at all. It's as if nothing is happening. What are these justices doing? Are they asked to not deal with this request? And is the reason this is stalled, does it have something to do with the US and UK relationship? I don't know. So you find that the FBI is continuing to question people. The FBI is a part of this story. If you get a copy of my book, The Political Case Against Julian Assange, which is called Guilty of Journalism, you look at this. In Guilty of Journalism, I have a chapter on the FBI. Ziggy Tordarson is this informant that they align with, who is just a sociopath, all kinds of mental craziness to this person. He's sexually abused minors, and he's a liar. He's a pathological liar, and he's recanted statements given to the FBI. Are they worried about that part of the case? Do they want to go back to that time and try to find somebody who can clean up the fact that they could never put Ziggy Tordarson on the stand during a trial? I don't know what this. It's been reported as this is a reboot or a reopening of the case, that maybe they might want to indict and add new charges. But if they're talking to the ghostwriter of the autobiography, and it's about 2011, it's probably not going to touch on new charges. It's going to still be part of the timeline. I imagine that they want to talk to Andrew to clean up some of the shoddiness of the case. I don't think it's about issuing another indictment. I don't think that the Biden Justice Department would be so flippant as to give another charge or issue another charge against Julian Assange. But They clearly do not care about the press freedom or human rights organizations that have condemned the continued actions. They don't feel they should be held responsible, as shown on World Press Freedom Day. The White House, again, still unwilling to answer reporters' questions about how this is consistent with their opposition to the jailing of Evan Gershkovich by Russia. How can he be in jail? And that's a bad thing. But Julian Assange is in jail. That's not a bad thing. The State Department decided, okay, well, we're going to get this question. Let's just outright defend the prosecution and screw everybody else who has protested this so far. We're just going to straight up say that we think Julian Assange is a criminal. And so that's what they said. Paraphrasing, very, very crudely paraphrasing, but that is essentially what we got on World Press Freedom Day from the State Department. He was not even the main spokesperson, a kind of deputy spokesperson. And all right, so where is this headed? What are we going to see happen? And it's so unclear. I think what is evident is that we're not close to anything that it could be called a breakthrough. Unfortunately for Julian Assange, there's just so much work that still has to be done in order to get close to freedom. And let's end with something that is a positive development. Let's end with how Stefania Maritzi was able to secure a kind of a small victory in her litigation. She's been pursuing records from the Crown Prosecution Service. This is, by the way, the outfit that is overseeing the extradition. They're responsible for getting that through and getting him onto a plane so Julian Assange can be put on trial in the United States. And Stefania Maritzi, for those of you who don't know, is an Italian journalist. She's written her own book, Secret Power. I've spoken with her. I've interviewed her. And I've been on panels with her, and it's been an honor. And I'm hugely supportive of the work that she's doing, litigating, pursuing these freedom of information litigation, these lawsuits. After years of running up against a brick wall, the first crack, a ruling on our FOIA, the judges ordered the Crown Prosecution Service in the UK to come clean about the destruction of key documents on Assange. And there's even a parliamentarian who has obtained new information on it and has asked for an independent inquiry. So I want to give some more details, though, about Stefania's work and just say that obviously in the next month or two, it'll probably make a whole lot of sense if we can get Stefania on this channel and talk to her about this work. She sued Ecuador. She sued the Swedish government. She sued the U.S. agencies, including the State Department. She sued entities in the UK to get these records. She's been fighting for them for several years. And now they are been told that they must say whether they hold any information on Assange and when and how and why that documentation was deleted. If they do hold it, they must release it or clarify the grounds for refusing to share that information. So we may learn something. We may learn a little bit more about the targeting of Julian Assange.